and our dear friends, Larry Johnson and Coral Wilkerson, are here with us. Welcome back, Larry and Larry.
Glad we made it to Friday. I'm not so sure about Monday.
Yeah, you got to start saying Neiman, welcome back, Larry Squared.
Exactly. Yeah, please hit like button, helping us reaching more people. And let me start, Larry, with you, because we had the negotiations happening between Iran and the United States in Geneva, mediated by Omanis. And here is what the Iranian foreign minister said about the negotiations for more than 6 hours, hours and a half. It was 4 hours, then they got some break, and then the second round of negotiations. Here is what he said.
Much, Minister Akshi, what is your assessment of today's negotiations?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, we had a very intensive, detailed discussion today, and I think we made a very good progress. It was for the first time that we had almost 6-7 hours of talks, both in the morning and the afternoon. It was still indirect, and I'm very thankful to the Foreign Minister of Oman for doing.
I don't know what's the issue with this sound. It's so low. That's why let me say what he said. He said that the outcome was somehow positive and they were progressing. They were somehow advancing in the negotiations, which was reflected by the Omani foreign minister. Then today, as we talk today, we see a lot of signs that the attack is coming. Something big is about to happen. Larry, what is your understanding of the current situation?
Arachi reminds me of a young Marine in the Philippines. A couple of my buddies who had Marines under their command told me about this. The Marine shows up and says, I met this girl, sir. I love her. We're going to get married. Well, she's a bar girl, which is a polite way of calling her a hooker. And the young Marine really believes that she loves him. And she's just using him. That's exactly what happened to Arachi with these so-called negotiations in Geneva. Because right now, as we're speaking, Kazakhstan is shutting its embassy in Iran. The British shutting their embassy in Iran. The warning, Baghdad. U.S. is evacuating its personnel from Baghdad. What do you think that means? That means we're going to war. Once again, and I'll draw another cartoon metaphor. Iran is turning out to be Charlie Brown trying to kick the football. Lucy would say, oh, Charlie, come on, this time I'm really for sure this time. And Charlie comes running up to kick it. Boom, misses, falls on his ass. We saw this a year ago, April 2025. Witkoff goes in and negotiates, comes out and basically says, yeah, we got a deal that will allow Iran to retain some measure of enrichment. 24 hours later, after he'd gotten the hell beat out of him by the Zionist lobby, he did a complete reversal. Oh, no enrichment whatsoever. If you're going to go into a negotiation, the other side's got to understand that what you say goes, and you can deliver on what you promise. Witkoff can't. They cannot. And I think this is an entire charade that's preparing for, I don't know if it's going to be Sunday or Monday, but the United States is going to attack Iran.
Yeah. Carl, what do you make of it?
I agree with Larry. I will say a couple of things that I think we're not considering, unless perhaps General Kane in his alleged warning to Trump considered it. And that is that we may indeed have the makings of a very serious war here. And I was talking with you beforehand, as you know. I think Scott Ritter made a mistake in his typical Marine, if I may say so, in his assessment of Russia and China's capabilities. Russia and China together have over 100 submarines. Those submarines are some of the most capable submarines in the world, attack and ballistic missile. But I'm talking here mostly about attack, which is about 40 in each fleet. They're superior submarines, the only ones in the world that match them and in some cases outclass them, mostly based on leadership of the skipper of the boat, are ours. All to say that the Northern Arabian Sea, after studying at the Naval War College for 3 years, 2 courses, the Northern Arabian Sea has some of the best convergence zones, temperatures, salinity levels, and so forth to negate both active and passive sonar, which is to say subs can hide there better than any other water on the face of the earth, other than being under the ice in the Arctic or the Antarctic. So you're looking at the possibility of a Russian, even a Chinese. Oh, by the way, did I say that the Chinese have a number of very quiet diesel electric boats, which would have no problem making that distance? People look at me and say, are you kidding me? I said, go back and look at what we did in the Pacific in World War II. We had 5,000 mile, 2 legs, 10,000 mile total diesel electric submarine patrols. We patrolled all the way to the Formosa Straits, the South China Sea, the Yellow Sea, the Sea of Japan, and we sunk boats there and came home. Tang and Wahoo were incredible at that sort of thing, the 2 best killers in World War II. So all to say, you can hide in the North Arabian Sea where no one can find you. Not even an attack sub from America can find you. In fact, you can be lying right beside each other and not know it. That's how difficult it is to find a sub in there. So how about I come out there, maybe a Chinese and a Russian boat, maybe I come out there and I spread 6 Wakecombing torpedoes out and kill a U.S. aircraft carrier, and then who knows? Was that an Iranian high-velocity missile or 2, or was that a submarine? I mean, they have the capacity to respond in a way that would be devastating. Not to say that we wouldn't eventually discover or think we had discovered the methodology used, and maybe that would be a bigger war, but don't discount their capability to do things. And I find people all the time discounting submarines. Mm-hmm. Most lethal weapon on the face of the earth, whether it's a ballistic missile sub with enough nuclear warheads to destroy us, or whether it's an attack sub, which can be quite stealthy, especially in these waters. So this is a lot more complicated, I think, than Scott was presenting it in terms of Russia and China's capacity to do things that initially we wouldn't even know what had been done, except the aircraft carrier was on the bottom of the ocean.
Hey, I missed what did Scott say? Can you just give a Reader's Digest version?
He just kind of, Nima, he was on your show, I think. He just kind of said that he didn't think Russia or China would intervene in any substantial way.
Oh,
and
boy.
He said his hint was that it wasn't in their capability to do so. And I don't believe that at all.
Yeah. I'd.
He said no. He said, Larry. In addition to what Colonel just said, he said that no army has the capabilities when it comes to the attack as the United States has. And he said that if the United States goes in, it goes all in, and they're gonna be most devastating that any army on the earth. That's why Russia and China may not intervene and may not,
Yeah, I love Scott like a brother, but
yeah, we all love him. It's not criticizing,
but
Scott.
he's so wrong on this. If for no other reason, and I've had a conversation with a friend who's still active duty and involved with these operations, and his attitude was, why would the Chinese want to help the ragheads? That's essentially what he said. Why would they want to help them? And I said, well, they've developed technologies that are for combat, for defending themselves, and they've never been applied in a real combat environment. So absolutely, they get to test it now in Iran, and they get to test it against the very country that's been threatening them. Yep. Absolutely. Why do you think they've deployed long-range air defense missiles to Iran? Reportedly, they've deployed this advanced 3D radar that can see out to 430 miles from Iran. that is mobile, difficult to detect. The Russians have been providing reportedly S-300, S-400 air defense systems. The importance of Iran now as a critical economic crossroads for both China and Russia as they construct this new world international economic order is Iran's just not some other country out there. I mean, it is a critical crossroads for the future. And that's why both Russia and China have been very active in providing support. And you know, the way that this U.S. force is being portrayed around Iran is very, very misleading. You know, they say, well, we got an armada of ships. We got one friggin' aircraft carrier with 3 destroyers. Please. They may have a submarine out there, likely, that can fire 100 Tomahawk cruise missiles. But that aircraft carrier and those 3 destroyers, very limited capability, because they're staying, 1,700 to 1,000 miles offshore. If they go close to shore, because they'll need to do that in order for the F-35Cs that are on both the aircraft carriers to operate, they only got a combat range of 600 miles. So they can fly out 600 miles. They need to be refueled. I don't see any U.S. tankers, KC-135s, flying over Iran and saying, oh, yeah, guys, with the gas stations here. They'll get shot down. So that means they have to be fueled offshore. Well, and you got the same problem with the deployment of the F-35As that are at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia and Mawafaq Salti in Jordan. Again, to get to the border of Iran is about a 700-mile flight for these guys. And then they got another 267 miles to go from the border to get to Tehran. So what we've deployed an impressive number of aircraft, 1/3 of the U.S. Air Force squadrons of F-35s. However, the operational requirements to make them combat effective in a hostile environment, I think that's one of the reasons General Kane was saying, this is a lot of risk here. No kidding. This is incredibly complex. And we haven't even begun to count what there's been one map published which shows about 100 different air defense system radars deployed north to south along that western border. This is madness. This is absolute madness what the United States is getting ready to do.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't have said it. I couldn't have said it as well. Granted, Scott's right in the sense that if we mustered everything we have and slammed it all into Iran, we could do some devastating damage. Meanwhile, Iran would be eliminating the state of Israel. But even saying that, what do you follow up with? Where are the forces you're going to put on the ground to make sure that whatever you did is consolidated and is to your advantage? Where are they? I'll tell you where they are. They're the same place those young men and women on Ford are. They're ready to mutiny in some cases because things have been so damn bad for them. You know, here's a message I got from a sailor this morning. I'm going to read it to you verbatim because it's so true. The USS Gerald Ford has been at sea for 241 days. Her deployment has been extended twice. She is now heading back toward the Middle East for a 3rd time. Sailors are missing funerals, missing births, missing their children's first steps. The ship's sewage system is failing, which we all know about, requiring maintenance calls every single day and acid flushes costing $400,000 each. Crew members are telling reporters they want to quit the Navy. Morale is described in terms that defense journalists have not used since Vietnam. This deployment is on track to reach 11 months. The post-Vietnam record is 294 days, set by Abraham Lincoln during COVID in 2020. The Ford will break it and she is not coming home. That's where we are with that. That's just one ship, yes, but it's a capital ship, it's a major ship, and it's necessary for these operations if they're going to be, like Scott was asserting, the full thing we can throw at them. I suspect there are other ships in similar conditions because I know how poorly the Navy's recruiting record lists itself over the past 6-7 years. 40% short in the U.S. Naval Reserve, where a lot of critical assets are, and 10 to 15% in the active force.
Larry, do you feel that they're going to use the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford in an offensive, or they're going to use it to defend Israel?
Oh, no, it's there to defend Israel. I mean, if it's in the Med, it has no offensive capability towards Iran. Because again, let's understand the distances we're talking about. When that F-35 takes off, it can fly for 600 miles, and then it's empty. It needs to be refueled, and so you have to calculate in there probably that when it's reached 500 miles, that's when you start refueling. You don't wait till you're on empty. But so the distance from Tel Aviv to Iran, it's about 1,600. It's well over 1,000 miles. So just from the standpoint of could they deliver any attack effectively? Now, if they're also the F-35s can carry what's called a JASSM, and it's an air-guided missile, air-to-ground missile, and it has a effective range around, they say 550, but let's round it down to 500. So that does give the planes a bit of standoff, but they're not taking into account the fact that the S-300 and S-400 are very capable, specifically designed to intercept those kinds of missiles. And in fact, in my understanding, some JASSMs have been used on the battlefield in Ukraine, and Russia has been able to shoot them down. So they're bringing not just theoretical knowledge, but the actual experience in doing this. But let's go back to what Colonel Wilkerson was pointing out. What the hell is the objective? I mean, this isn't, hey, let's just get together and get out and blow shit up. What's the objective? And we've seen, with Operation Rough Rider in Yemen last March, they had one clear objective: establish freedom of navigation so that any ship that sailed into the Red Sea could sail wherever it wanted to go without fear of being attacked. That's a very clear, specific objective. The U.S. failed to achieve it. We failed with 2 aircraft carriers, for God's sake. So, now we're going to transform Iran, which is, 9 times the physical size of Yemen, and with one aircraft carrier that's going to be engaged with offensive operations, just one, and it has to stay far enough offshore so it doesn't get sunk. These guys have watched too many Top Gun movies, is what I think.
Yeah. Another aspect of it that people aren't really considering, Larry suggested this in his earlier remarks. Think 1936 Spain, when people were testing their equipment, especially the Nazis. And think about this when you're thinking about Russia and China. Now, Russia's tested its ground capacity really well in Ukraine, but it hasn't tested its naval capacity to any great degree. It's had some problems with it, submarines and surface boats, but not a lot. And Russia's got, as I said, a pretty formidable submarine fleet. And I dare anybody to tell me that instantly, or even in a week or two, they could tell what had actually sunk U.S. combatants. I dare them. They'll lie and say they can, but they won't be able to. Not unless somebody is videotaping the wake of the torpedo hitting the stern of the carrier or whatever. And they're not going to be able to do that very well because the torpedoes most sophisticated travel very deep and don't show a surface wake and only come up and hit when they're under their target.
Yeah. Larry, Politico reported that maybe the attack would be an Israeli attack supported by the United States. When it comes to the public opinion in the United States, more than 70% of the people, they don't support a new war in the Middle East against Iran. And how can they change this sort of mindset on the part of the American people? Is that going to be a trick to be used in this war? That the Iranian would obviously fight back, and they're going to hit, the United States and Israel. That's why some people would argue that that could be the main goal. Israel going first, Iran attacks, and some people get killed, and then the United States enters a conflict.
No, you can't rule that out. The lies that have been told repeatedly to the American people about Iran are they're staggering. They keep insisting, Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism. No, it's not. I mean, it's just, that's just a flat out lie. But most Americans believe it. They believe that Iran has been, consistently attacking the United States and ignoring the fact that particularly Iran's military operations in Syria were directed at the very radical Islamists that ostensibly attacked us on 9/11. And so what should have been a natural alliance between the United States and Iran has been hindered, and it's been hindered by the Zionists. And, I do not put it past them to maybe stage an attack on one of the U.S. ships and have it blamed on Iran. Because if the story is told, hey, we were minding our own business and we were attacked out of the blue, therefore let's, we got to go destroy Iran. Now, the problem with this is the U.S. doesn't have that capability, short of using nuclear weapons. We've already established the limitations of U.S. naval power last March in the Red Sea. And there we had 2 aircraft carriers. You had at least 4 destroyers. You had 1 cruiser. And there may have even been additional ships of those categories. We had air supremacy. I mean, we controlled the air. And with all of that, and we had our exceptional satellite intelligence. And yet with all of that, we had difficulty locating mobile missile launchers, which is why we put MQ-9 Reapers into Yemen to look, because they could find it and then they could shoot. The only problem was the Yemenis got pretty damn good at shooting down our Reapers. They were shooting down 1 a week. Yeah. And that was over almost $250,000 worth of Reapers in the toilet. We saw the chaos of combat where apparently friendly fire, we shot down one of our own F-18s. And then, we never got the full story about the other one that rolled off of an aircraft carrier deck.
Turned too fast.
Yeah.
Turned too fast and in too narrow a rotation because of the Red Sea.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would that be? Huh? See, so, I mean, this notion that we've got some great invincibility, as Andrei Martyanov has consistently noted and correctly noted, we haven't won a damn thing since World War II. When, we went into Panama and we roughed up the Panamanians and captured Noriega. When I never saw Muhammad Ali strutting around saying, hey, I beat up the kid in the wheelchair, but that's us. We like to take care of the weak and those that can't really defend themselves. And then we use that to boost our own reputation.
Yeah.
Nima, if I were doing some of the things I used to do for Powell that he used to say he kept me around for, operational out-of-the-box thinking was what he called it. If I were Iran, I would let Israel attack me and then destroy them. And then if the United States came in, only then would I start attacking U.S. assets. But I would take the opportunity. I've been attacked. Israel attacked me to destroy them. I think they could do it in 6 or 7 days. Would we get our act together sufficiently to re-coordinate? Because we probably have to re-coordinate and calibrate what we're going to do, because I don't think I see a plan here. I really don't.
Yeah.
The plan was exquisite for Venezuela for one particular reason, I think. I'm all the time bad-mouthing SOF, Special Operation Forces. but they do their little missions. And I don't mean that in a derisive fashion. I mean, they have little missions. They don't have big, full-blown operational military missions. They do them quite well, quite precisely. And if it all goes on time and goes as planned, then they usually are successful. That's not the way this kind of war is. This is big stuff. And we don't have a record lately of doing big stuff very well. So if I were Iran, I'd do that. I'd go right after Israel. I wouldn't hit a single U.S. or Arab asset until it actually became apparent the U.S. was in it too.
Yeah. Larry, there is a footage that shows a large number of U.S. Air Force refueling tankers that are stationed in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. How safe is that going to be? Are they going to stay there if something happens, or they're going to move them around?
Well, they believe that the Patriot missile defense and Iron Dome and the THAADs will protect them. Bad assumption. They'll find out that they were wrong. There really is a tendency to grossly underestimate the capabilities of both Iran and Russia and China. You know, the Western arrogance in this regard is just it's completely undeserved. You know, it'd be one thing if we were like repeat Super Bowl champs and we could strut around like, hey, we're pretty damn good because, you know, we've won 3 Super Bowls. But, you know, when you look at our failures in Afghanistan, failures in Iraq, failure in Vietnam, you know, it piles up. And I think Iran is prepared to destroy those air assets. And let's understand, you know, so every one KC-135, my understanding is in a combat environment or situation, they can refuel, one tanker can refuel 4 planes before it has to peel off. And again, this isn't a 2 or 3 minute process.
No.
You know, it takes some time to line up, get connected, and get the fuel going. Well, now multiply that times 168 F-35s that have been deployed, at least. And on top of that, 20 F-22s. So we have assembled a massive air force or air capability. But then when you get down to how do they actually carry out the mission? This is not, you know, it's not like the latest version of the Top Gun movie where, you know, Tom Cruise, they're flying in through the mountains of Iran and they're, you know, dropping shit here and there. No, it's not going to be like that. And, you know, I am making some assumptions here. I am assuming that as a result of the events last June, Iran has learned some important lessons. That, you know, the majority of the attacks that took place on ground radars and air defense systems were actually ground attacks from groups that had been infiltrated into Iran. I don't think they've got that problem this time. I think the counterintelligence elements in the Iranian intelligence service have been quite active since last June, and now especially since the protests in early January. So this is, you know, the United States is, we read our own press and convinced ourselves that we're really as good as we claim we are. And then as, you know, Colonel Wilkerson with the letter he read, you know, we always wondered why they called it on this old sailing ships the poop deck. Well, okay, poop is the French word for deck. So they weren't really defecating on it. But on the U.S. Gerald Ford, they certainly are. So if we can't, if we can't keep a plumbing system working on a $13 billion aircraft carrier, how are we going to do all these other magnificent things that are actually more complex? That's what I don't get.
$16 billion now.
Oh, 60. My bad.
Ford's the most expensive boat ever or ship ever built.
Colonel, when it comes to the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, do you think that what has happened is something structural, something that has happened during the years, or the soldiers on the the crew are not happy with the situation, and you've mentioned 8 months being on far away from their families, and that's why they're not happy with the whole situation, that they may did this because they want to get back home?
From what I'm hearing, and it's anecdotal, but I think it's pretty sound, it's both. The system is flawed. It should never have been designed and built the way it was for such an enormous floating ship. And you got so many people that I don't think they really put the two things together, the size of the ship and the number of people and the number of times the people would have to urinate or go to the bathroom, whatever. And so they designed a system that is really easily clogged, and at the same time, probably in and of itself is inadequate for the ship, its size and density of population. So I think the sailors took advantage of that, though, and they started stuffing things in it, T-shirts, things like that, because they were sick and tired of no port calls, sick and tired of, if it were a port call, 24 hours and half the crew didn't even get to go. It's probably a little bit of both. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect it's a little bit of both bad design and irritated troops.
Yeah. Larry, it was in the news that the U.S. military most expensive drone, it's called Triton and something like that, $230 million has reportedly vanished near Iran.
Oh, yeah.
Is that the same case of the Beast of Kandahar or something like that? Or what is the news on that? What is realistic about that? Is that why?
Yeah, no, I think the U.S., it was either shot down or the Iranians took control of it.
Yeah.
And they've done that before. I mean, this the Shahed drone is modeled after what was a CIA drone that the Iranians brought down intact back in 2011, 2012. So, when you get into this arena, plagiarism is a good thing. If you can copy off of somebody else, you're not going to get an F from the professor. I know with your students, you'd punish them, but in the field of intelligence and military technology, if you can copy something off of somebody else that's got something great, go for it. Do it.
Yeah, Chinese are great at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting, Nima. I don't know if you saw that movie back there a few years ago that kind of suggested this when the F-35 was still not quite as bad as it looks now. What if they capture the F-35, fly it into a mountain, fly it into the ground, fly it out to sea? I mean, in this movie, there's a suggestion that, and I'm told the Air Force and Lockheed in particular have done something about this, but they actually took over the aircraft and flew it in the movie. And then it came out that it actually could be done. From the ground, you take over the aircraft because the system is so sophisticated and so vulnerable in that sense. I'm told they repaired that. They fixed it. They put a patch in, whatever you have to do. But let's suppose, as Larry said, the Iranians have figured out how to do that, how to capture the airplane.
Yeah, and let's note also as well that the Russians, Chinese have pretty advanced. Well, their electronic warfare capabilities far superior to ours. And again, with Russia, it's combat tested. They've tested it under fire, so they bring that expertise to the table as well.
That's something that people are forgetting too, is that Russia's probably the most experienced military in the world now. And you bet that experience, where it's relevant, is being shared with their friends and allies.
Larry, I want to bring up in another argument that Scott said on my podcast, that is the American army is much more prepared than Russians or Iranians or Chinese, and that's why they may bring some sort of game-changing, operations with the case of Iran. Is that the case? How prepared? How you compare the armies, both of you?
How could he say that? Based on what? I mean, the United States, we've got our experience over the last 25 years has been fighting tribesmen, whether in Iraq or in Afghanistan. So they're not organized armies with a well-defined chain of command, wearing uniforms, with base installations, etc. These are sort of like my ancestors fighting the Brits back in 1776. They're farmers, they're herders, and so we weren't effective against them. I mean, yeah, we could bring in more firepower against guys that were carrying rifles, essentially. But we've shown no experience whatsoever in being able to effectively maneuver against a peer. In fact, the counteroffensive, so-called counteroffensive in Ukraine that was launched in June of 2023 was not the result of Ukrainian planning. That was planned by NATO, U.S. officers. They planned it and executed it, and it failed. And the failure, I mean, this is what I found astonishing. I mean, I don't claim to be von Clausewitz or Sun Tzu, but I do have enough understanding to know that if you're going to launch an offensive, a ground offensive against well-entrenched forces that have, they've got fortifications, they've got interlocking bands of fire, they've got artillery, you damn well better have some air power with you to soften it up along with artillery. And that air power's got to include close air support. They didn't have that at all. They didn't make it a requirement. Oh, this will work out. We'll be at the Sea of... I mean, we saw Petraeus and Hodges and Jack Keane and all these clowns. Oh, we're going to be at the Sea of Azov in August. Didn't happen. So I don't know where Scott gets his, positive assessment from. I haven't, we haven't seen it in terms of the actual performance of the U.S. military.
Yeah. Colonel, the other point Scott brought up is that the conflict, the main problem for the United States would be the sustainability of the conflict. You go all in, then how long can you sustain the intensity of your attacks, which is one of the most important questions right now for any attack, for any planner on the part of the United States. How do you find that?
Well, I have heard, and again, it's anecdotal. Well, in some cases, it's a little better than anecdotal, that one of the reasons Kane, if he did, and I suspect this is probably accurate, that he did, in fact, make some remonstrance to the president about this might not be as easy as you think, was because he had people go out, a team go out and tour what would be not just RTX, Lockheed, Grumman, and other main contractor facilities, but tour what was available. And one of the states he went to in particular was Arkansas, what was available to increase, ramp up production in a timely fashion. And he got a very sour picture. And so when Larry says, or anyone says, we have only a limited supply of Patriots, a limited supply of this, that, and the other thing, and Israel is going to use a lot of those themselves, they're right. What do you do when a week into the war, you ain't got no bullets left?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a simple math problem. And that's why I'm, sort of astonished that our so-called planners failed to comprehend this. So an inbound missile from, say, if Iran fires a missile at Israel or at our bases where we have our forces based in Saudi Arabia or Jordan, that Patriot missile battery or the THAAD, they're going to have to fire a minimum of 2 missiles to deal with one inbound. Well, as we've seen during the 12-day war, Iran doesn't just fire 1 or 2, they fire 50 to 100. Well, okay, just do the math right there. At a minimum, if they're firing 200, you're up 400 Patriot missiles. Oh, so why does that matter? Because annual production of a Patriot missile, not the launcher, but the actual missile, 700 a year. So there in one day, in one engagement, you'll use up 60% of an annual production in just that one day. What happens if they repeat that for 3 or 4 more days? And the same with the destroyers. They carry 96 cells of these vertical launch systems that are in the deck. I guess, 50 in front and 46 in the back. And once they fire the missile that's loaded in there, the only way they can reload that is they have to go to a port that has a crane and facilities to reload. So all of a sudden, again, I can easily imagine a scenario in which Iran launches 200 drones accompanied by 20 missiles at one of the destroyers. Yeah, and they may shoot most of that down, but when it's over, they're depleted again. And now they've got to sell out back. And if they sell out, the carrier's got to go with them, because the carrier can't stand out there by itself, because it needs those destroyers in theory to defend it. I mean, this isn't complicated stuff, but by God, we've created a Rube Goldberg system of defense. Very expensive, very fragile, that it doesn't work under optimal combat conditions, and it's logistically very, very costly. It's a system designed to make contractors wealthy.
Colonel, how do you feel about the British government? Are they going to be part of the attack? Are they going to, because we've learned from the British fighter jets are coming, or, in Israel, in Cyprus, and all of these news coming out. How do you see the British being part of this, or not? They're not going to get that involved.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. They're stupid enough to, apparently. They've shown that over Ukraine and other theaters. But I don't think it's going to be decisive in any way. They'll get themselves shot out of the air, too. As Larry was talking, I was going back to a moment we had with Secretary Perry and General Gary Luck on the peninsula in Korea. It was a very heightened tension. We thought we were going to war. In fact, when we met with Secretary Perry, this is my Marine Corps War College seminar. When we met with Perry, he essentially said he was very afraid we were going to war. Luck was not quite as tentative about it or as disturbed about it, but he was disturbed. We talked about 1,000 artillery rounds, or 1,000 artillery pieces, howitzers essentially, in the mountains that would come out and get at least 10 rounds off before his F-16s and other ROCAF Air Force assets could get them. And that was a deal, too, that they were going to get all of them at one time. Those rounds would hit Greater Seoul, and you got 250,000 Americans there and so forth. And we finally got everybody to admit that this was a very tenuous situation. Now, I served on the peninsula. I served with the 2nd Infantry Division. I was there when the tree came down, for example. I saw how unready we were for an attack across the DMZ. I saw how unready we were. So we're sitting there talking to them about, okay, let's say their military moves at the same time. They invest Seoul. They pretty much got it burning, destroyed it. And they say, we're finished. You want your capital city back or whatever? We'll go to negotiations for it. Sort of like we did when the first Korean War ended, or ended in terms of real fighting and went on to talks. People don't think that way. Oh, yes, they do. And maybe you might have a situation like that exist, plus your unreadiness for it. And that's, like I said, I saw unreadiness for it up close and personal. I had to load my Cobra with 2.75 folding fin rockets by landing on top of the ammo dump. That's how unready we were. So that's got to be taken into consideration too. It's got to be taken into consideration, as Larry said, that we haven't done anything like this in a long time. Venezuela, yeah. Afghanistan, yeah. Bombed Libya, yeah. Iraq, Somalia, and a host of others, kind of like the IDF, you know, killing civilians and dropping bombs on people and that sort of thing. We can do that pretty well. This is going to be a real war.
Larry, what do we know about, the Iranians or Chinese maybe being trained during the war in Ukraine? Because we've seen North Koreans in the Kursk region. And how about Iranians and Chinese? Do you think that they were part of, they were participating? I don't know how that was possible to train Iranians and Chinese, because I've heard many, in the videos coming out of Russia, in the Russian channels, I've heard Iranians, Persian language, someone is among them talking in Persian. And you can recognize somehow whenever you see a video coming out. What is your understanding of that?
Well, if they have been there, it hasn't been very very large presence, and it could be more sort of familiarization. Look, there's the whether we're talking Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. If they're not fighting, they're training. So training and the ideal training, if you can get it, would be actual live fire. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me that certain Iranian and or Chinese observers, if nothing else, were there to see how these combat operations took place. Up until a year ago, though, Iran was heavily involved in Syria, fighting against ISIS and al-Nusra and the various radical Sunni groups. But if we step back and look over the last 4 years, and this is the point Colonel Wilkerson made earlier, Russia stands head and shoulders above every other country in the world right now in terms of lessons learned from combat. I would put Ukrainian at number 2, except they've been on the receiving end. They haven't been dishing it out. They've been taking it on the chin. And has Russia's made mistakes. They've made errors. They've learned. I mean, that's the point. They've learned to make quick adjustments on the battlefield based upon the good intelligence that they're getting. They don't sit there and say, "Oh, well, this is not in accordance with the plan. So just because you're a frontline soldier and you're seeing this, we're going to ignore that." No, it's just the opposite. They've been very responsive to what the frontline troops are saying. Hey, this particular drone, it sucks, or here's what we need to do to defend ourselves better. So yeah, those lessons are going to be brought to Iran. But let's recall also, in the early days of Russia's special military operation, Iran played a critical role in supplying drones. And if you think that since that 12-day war, Iran's been sitting back, not producing thousands of drones, because they do a lot of it, most of it's done underground. I don't think Western intelligence has a clue about what the actual capability and size of the Iranian missile and drone force is.
I would just add to that, Nima, that if you look at our Civil War, for example, and you look at the messages going back, particularly from the consul in South Carolina to Britain, when Britain was trying to make a decision as to whether or not it threw its weight behind the South, increased and enhanced its cotton situation, and essentially took the position of the South and wound up probably creating 2 countries on the other side of the Atlantic. Not a bad strategy, really. Long story there. But one of the things the consul identifies to the British leadership, the foreign minister and the prime minister at the time, because he was going straight to them, often straight to the prime minister. The foreign minister would get a copy because his position was so important and the decision going to be made was so important. One of the things he reports on sort of anecdotally, but really and very realistically, is the fear that ought to be in every European country's heart. And they had, and confirmed it for the British diplomatically through channels, they had observers on our battlefields. They had observers at Antietam, observers at Gettysburg, observers at Cold Harbor. They were afraid, and he put the fear of God in the British about this too, that 1,000,000-man army that Grant was in charge of and that was battle hardened to the max was going to be used elsewhere in the world. Well, we didn't do that. We demobilized and, went out to the frontier with a few battalions, and that was about it. But they were scared because of those observers on the battlefield. All to say that Larry's right. There are observers all over these battlefields from other countries trying to learn what's going on, especially technologically and such. So Russia, China, and Iran, probably through that triple entente, if you will, are probably as knowledgeable, certainly Russia more than anyone, about modern battle as anyone in the world, including us.
Yeah. Larry, last week
we've had observers on a lot of these battlefields too, so don't let me discount that.
Last time we talked, I remember last week we were talking about the Vice President of the United States who is trying to do something to go against, these sort of, people who want to attack Iran. Here, I would wonder what is your understanding of the current situation with J.D. Vance, because it seems that he's turning into one of the most, he says that we're capable of doing, the war, the way that we are doing the war is going to be different and it's going to be game changing. Here is what J.D. Vance said.
And as crystal clear as it could be, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. That would be the ultimate military objective if that's the route that he chose. That is, of course, what we're trying to accomplish, as the president said, through the preferred route of diplomacy. But it's very simple. We have to get to a position where Iran, the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, cannot threaten the world with nuclear terrorism. And it's very simple. I think most Americans understand that you can't let the craziest and worst regime in the world have nuclear weapons. That's what the president is accomplishing. That's what the president has set as our goal. He's going to try to accomplish it diplomatically. But as we all know, Bill, the president has a number of other tools at his disposal to ensure this doesn't happen. He's shown a willingness to use them. And I hope the Iranians take it seriously in their negotiations tomorrow, because that's certainly what the president prefers.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I don't know where the term nuclear terrorism. Go ahead.
I'm back in 2002. I was back in 2002 for part of the State of the Union, too. Quote, this is a direct lift from George W. Bush in 2002. We must not allow the world's most dangerous nation to have the world's most dangerous weapons. That was a line in Trump's State of the Union. That's what J.D. Vance just said, too. A little bit more parsing the words, but this is the same thing all over again with regard to creating in the American people's mind the idea that Iran is a threat to the United States. It is not. Yeah. Categorically, it is not.
Yeah, it's just look at the numbers in terms of if we judge a country by either its direct attack or its use of proxies. When it comes to the United States and Iran, the United States at a minimum is responsible for the deaths of at least 300,000 Iranians. Iran, in terms of its actions and proxies, is responsible for the deaths of less than 1,000 Americans. So just the numbers tell the story. J.D. Vance is lying. I don't know if it's out of ignorance or if he's just deliberately ignoring the facts, but Iran is not the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world at all. It's just not. The numbers don't back it up. Sit down and show me the terrorist attacks each year. The groups that have been consistently reported on by the Central Intelligence Agency, and then later by the National Counterterrorism Center and NCTC, they collect and report attacks and casualties. And let's just worry about groups that actually kill people. The groups that have killed more people, 80% of all international terrorist attacks are carried out by Sunni extremists. And it is not, and Iran is not a part of any of those groups. ISIS, Al Qaeda, Taliban, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is another one. Except we give that guy a hug in the Oval Office and put him in power in Syria. So again, this is so typical. We've seen this before throughout history, as Colonel Wilkerson was noting. We did it to go to war with Iraq in 2003, and now we're doing it to gin up a false justification for going to war with Iran. One of these days, we're going to do it, and it's going to bite us in the ass something terrible. And I don't wish that upon us, but there's a part of me that says, I hope it happens, and it happens soon, so that we will stop this. We will stop this cycle of violence. We're the ones with over 700 military bases scattered around the world. China, Iran, Russia combined, they don't have 15 military bases scattered around the world. We're the ones that have been constantly stirring up wars and killing Syrians, Iraqis, Afghanis, Libyans, Somalians. Go down the list. We could add Cubans to that now too.
If you go down the list of terrorists in the world, according to the definition of terrorism that we've all pretty much signed up to, if you go down that list, the greatest terrorist organization on the face of the earth is the Israeli Defense Force. And who then is the greatest sponsor of terrorism on the face of the earth? The empire, America.
Yeah. Colonel, one of the main problems, in my opinion, in the eyes of the Israelis, in the eyes of the Netanyahu administration, is the Iranian, after the experience of 12-day war, was that, the missiles can do something that, Iran doesn't need to, have nukes that can hit us with the missiles. That's the main problem right now. That's why Marco Rubio started talking about Iranian missiles. And how realistic is that? Because let's assume that they're talking about nuclear program. Then missiles, who's going to care about, what? Because you have to have some sort of foundation for the argument you have. You cannot go that much far. That makes no sense for your adversary.
Not if you're us. You're talking to the guy who put together the preparations for and then the ultimate execution of the 5 February 2003 presentation to the United Nations. Stupid me. You don't need any evidence. All you need is your rhetoric. J.D. Vance proved that. George W. Bush proved that. Dick Cheney proved that. Condoleezza Rice proved that. A host of people proved it, and we're doing it again. We are proving again that all you need is the word, and you can get enough people to believe you, and you just keep hammering it home. That's how Trump won the presidency. That's how Trump is maintaining a portion of the American people. It's descending every day. I saw the facts yesterday. Boy, it is dropping pretty fast, both approval rating and disapproval rating. But that's how you do it. You lie. You lie through your teeth. Bibi Netanyahu makes a living out of lying through his teeth every day. And by the way, I don't know if you saw that one thing. It's on tape. You can watch it. It's in Hebrew, but the subscripts are pretty good. At the end of his remarks in Hebrew to a group of his gang, he said, and if it doesn't work, they're going to receive the most devastating attack imaginable. Well, what the hell do you think that means? Have you already uploaded the bombs? Have you already moved them to the point of uploading?
Yeah.
When he speaks in Hebrew, Nemo, you need to listen. When he speaks in English, he's dissembling, he's lying, he's cheating, he's stealing. But when he's talking to his buds in Hebrew, he's usually telling what he thinks is the truth.
Larry, here is what Rubio said.
point you to, however, is that Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everybody to understand that, and beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans.
God,
he's a good liar.
oh my Christ. Narco Marco.
Yeah.
Has he been using some of his own drugs that his relatives were selling on the streets of Miami?
You just picked the template up off of Cuba and put it on Tehran.
Good Lord. Again, who has attacked whom? Has it been, the United States? The way that Marco and these clowns presented is like, we're the United States. We're like some little girl sitting in a park smelling flowers, and these ugly thugs from Iran have come along and tried to rape us. In fact, we're the rapist.
Yeah.
We're the murderer. We're the killers. Iran has basically been defending itself. We're the ones that fund, support, train the Mujahideen al-Khalq, and the Mujahideen al-Khalq has carried out. Hey, guys, stop! My dogs are in here going crazy. They've carried out assassinations of a dozen Iranian scientists. Can you imagine what the United States would be doing if Iran was carrying out assassinations of top scientists or financiers here in the United States? I mean, we'd be justifiably outraged. We've been doing that. We assassinated Soleimani, and justify that. So we're the ones that have been using violence against Iran consistently. They do like to commonly blame Iran for the bombing of the Marine installation in Beirut, Lebanon in October of 1983. But Alistair Crook, who was around at the time and is quite familiar with the area, said that was Amal. That wasn't Hezbollah. That was Amal that did it. Well, that group was founded in 1972. Again, for the math challenged out there, that's 7 years before the rise of the Islamic Republic in Iran, okay? So this group had its own reasons and motives to attack. They didn't need Iran's encouragement or funding or support. So this pattern of propaganda to whip the American people into a froth, so that then we'll get behind a war that if we can't win, and that will likely result in some significant losses for us.
And all I got to say, Nima, is Ankara better be deeply concerned, because according to Naftali Bennett, they're next on the list. And you better believe we'll come up with the same rhetoric.
Carol, just to wrap up this session, if Trump attacks, I think that he's going to attack, but let's see what would be the time, the exact timing of the attack. But how do you see, let's say it goes wrong, it goes in a wrong direction, and it doesn't get that much of what Trump is asking for, is looking for. What would be the repercussions of that outcome for Donald Trump himself?
Well, my estimate, and it's no better than anyone else's probably, but my estimate is that it won't go well for anyone at all. On the Iraq side, the Israel side, the Arab side, others in the region, and us. It won't go good at all. And that'll be the consternation that faces every partner, every participant, and their allies. What do we do now? Because it really has gone sour. And it could do that in any number of ways, the most devastating of which might be Israel going down in the first 5 to 6 days and using a nuclear weapon, which opens an entirely new vista. Question there is, will we all stop, take cognizance of what's happened, and back up, or will we escalate? That's the real problem there, I think. And there are other ways of thinking of escalation than just, Israel using more than one nuclear weapon, or maybe Pakistan giving somebody else one, or whatever. There are all kinds of implications to that. It's kind of very much, in my view, like August, when everybody thought, Britain, Germany, Russia, they all thought, France, they thought the war would be over in 6 months. And each of them thought their alliance or entente would be successful. It was the bloodiest war in human history up to that point. This could be the same kind of condition. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm trying to describe the potential for this situation that everyone in it seems to not be considering, except maybe for the Iranians.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what we need is a U.S. Officer, regardless of whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, that will stand up and say, I must resign my commission. I am not going to be party to an illegal war. The president is taking us to war without an act by Congress under our Constitution. The only way we can go to war is if Congress authorizes it. And until such point as if Congress authorizes it, then yep, salute, carry out your orders. But that's not the case here.
Yeah.
And Trump, you know, if he proceeds with this, it's going to be an error of history without precedent, because normally, like even George W. Bush, when he went to war in Iraq, he had 71% of the American people supporting it. But now you got 21% supporting. So when it goes bad, I don't say if it goes bad, it will go bad. When it goes bad, then you look around for who else to blame. There's no other place but the blame to fall on Trump. And that will mark, I believe, the effective end of his presidency. Now, from that standpoint, that'll make the Democrats thrilled. But it's going to come at a terrible cost for the United States. And we can't rule out that with Russian warships and Chinese warships in the area, with Russian and Chinese personnel on the ground in Iran, you know, if the United States proceeds with this attack, the ramifications for it extend beyond Israel and Iran and U.S. relationships. This will destroy any possibility for a negotiated settlement out of Ukraine, because again, it will show that why should Putin waste his time talking to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner?
Yeah,
because here the Iranians are going, "Hey man, we had a great meeting. We're moving positive. We got an option." And before they meet again in Geneva on Monday, the United States very well may attack. And so, well, we had no choice. Well, then why even talk to Witkoff and Kushner? Their words are meaningless. They can't deliver on anything. And then, I just saw another news item. The Trump administration is taking steps to take control of Rosneft, one of the Russian oil companies, so that we'll get to control the resources. Yeah, that's a way to promote goodwill with Russia in negotiations.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable what these clowns are doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the bad news, Johnson.
It was great to talk
always
to
a
you.
pleasure.
may you live in dangerous times.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got that going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank